This week, many European nations and the United States of America commemorated the 75th anniversary of VE Day, Victory in Europe. May 8, 1945, it was made official. The war in Europe is over. World War II would continue on until the summer of 1945 in the Pacific Theater, but in May 1945, it was over for the European nations. If you want to see very happy people, check out the black and white photographs of the original VE Day. Those local Europeans finally were able to leave their homes and their towns, villages, and their cities, freely go out and about, and who absorbed their appreciation, their thankfulness, and their love? The American soldiers absorbed it, because our soldiers were there in Germany, and in Belgium, and France, and in England. And when the Europeans were finally able to leave their homes and leave their towns, they sought out the American soldiers, gave them hugs, gave them kisses. So black and white photographs of May 1945 see some of the happiest people you ever see. And even the American soldiers have a glow on them, especially when they're being kissed by women of their own age. They are being appreciated. They're being celebrated. And maybe never before, or maybe never since in American history, were American soldiers treated as such heroes by the people they came to liberate, give their freedom to. And so, photographs of very happy people. Americans made the difference in that war. All historians have a consensus on that. We sent 16 million men to serve in that war in one capacity or another. Also, we made a difference in the war. We kept things going at the home front. Keep things going here to keep things going overseas. And so you know the history of women entering into the workforce, minorities moving from down south to up north to the industries. It's a time of Rosie the Riveter, flexing muscle. We can do it. And so we know the ways that Americans made the difference overseas and on the home front. But spiritually, we also made a difference. And we also made a difference not just in the factory in the home front, but in the churches. If you're to go into a Catholic church today, there's something there that we tend not to notice except for particular civil occasions, and that's the American flag. The American flag made an appearance in Catholic parishes during the beginning of World War II. And at that time, it only had 48 stars on it. Alaska and Hawaii would later be a state. But we put that flag in there during the beginning and throughout World War II, and it's still there today. Why did we put it in there at that given point in time? And why is it still there? A couple things the American flag represents within the Catholic Church. Number one, originally, we put it in there to remember our young men, our soldiers. Some of them, and your locals can tell you about this, are right out of high school, and some of them were not even out of high school yet. 17, 18, to the early 20s. They went overseas to serve. We put that flag in there to remember our local boys, to pray for them. The Catholics during the early 40s were 15% of the general American population. But in regard to service in World War II, with all the armed forces service, we were upwards of 35% of all those who served. And why did the Catholic young man go to serve in that war? He did it because it was his time to serve. He did it because, well, he didn't want to be left behind. If one of his peers was going, he was going to go there too. He went there to defend his country, because for the Catholic at this point in time, after a generation or two of immigration, this was his country. He went there to defend it. And also, it was in his blood to have a care for his country of origin, because as Catholics, most of the countries of origins for us are those European nations. So he went to liberate his fatherland, liberate it from either occupation or tyranny. It's one of those things that's just in your blood, and you go and you do either consciously or unconsciously. Go ahead and do. And our American soldiers, another quality about them, they were church-going boys, both the Catholic and the Protestants. And when you see World War II movies, you can see that they know their prayers and they have a religious sense about them when they also go off to war. And with that, they were fighting to protect Christendom, where Christendom was established, and that's in these European nations, and protect and defend and liberate Western civilization. Again, it was something in their blood, and when our American soldiers went out there, those are the contributions they made. That's some of what they were fighting for. And so the flag in the Catholic Church represents that. Think about those who are serving overseas. And number two, it reflects a reminder, then and now, for Catholics, what to pray for. This is your country now. Once upon a time, it was not. We all came from somewhere else. All of us Americans came from somewhere else. But now this is your country. So you pray for whatever your intentions are. You pray for your church and you pray for your country every single Mass. And you notice that's part of how the Catholic petitions are laid out. We pray for our church and we also pray for something with our country on a very regular basis. The American flag is not in our church to compete against any of the Catholic symbols in there. It's not there to compete against the crucifix or anything else, but it serves as a reminder. Pray for your country. You built this parish, you built this church in the land of the free, a land that gave you the freedom to worship, a land that gave you the freedom and the opportunity of your own will and rallying your fellow Catholics together to build this church. You have a spiritual home planted in the soil of the land of the free. And so, protect and defend and pray for your church and your country, because you have no church here unless you had this particular country, and the two go together. And so the flag and the Catholic Church then and now as a reminder, pray for your country. And the old timers can share with us, because they still have the memories of what it was like to pray together during a time of crisis, during the time, World War II in particular. Not just for Mass would those churches be packed with Catholics, but for any and all of the other community prayers. We're praying a rosary, okay, everybody, all Catholics are going to pray together. We're going to have adoration, either for 1 hour and benediction 2, or we're going to have 40 hours of adoration, where everybody does a time slot before the Blessed Sacrament, praying for the safety of our local soldiers, whom we know by name, praying for the well-being of our families, maybe families who have lost a soldier in the war. We're praying for them, and praying for victory. The old-timers remember those churches were packed during the time of crisis. They all came to pray. And the Lord allowed it throughout the time of the war. You pray for your particular intentions, you pray for the intentions of the church, and you pray for the well-being of your soldiers and your country during a time of crisis. So that was a reminder. The flag was there from the beginning of the war to the end, and we Catholics still have that opportunity to have that type of prayer whenever we go into our church. Well-being of our church, our families, and our country. And so, we're reminded of this. The Catholic Church made a difference in World War II. Not just in general, but in particular, on a local level. And if you know your history, you know most of the soldiers, percentage-wise, came from small towns throughout this country. And so, the service of those from our local communities and the prayers from those who stayed committed to prayer in a time of crisis, how could it not have made a difference in the victory for the greatest war in human history? And so VE Day, we commemorate 75th anniversary this year. Remember the contributions, not just of America in general, but you Catholics, remember the contributions of your Catholic parishes in particular. And you can remember it by looking at your church, going inside and seeing the flag out there, and going to the graveyard and seeing the upright markers of those who served, and they came from our hometown. And so remember the contributions of your local parish, and also remember the lessons of service and sacrifice and prayer that were set by the parishioners during that time.